Rob Rosen is a pivotal figure in the world of electronic music and synthesis. In a very short time, Rob's played an instrumental role in designing and maintaining the complex synth setups of some of the biggest names in music, earning him a reputation as synth tech to the stars. Rob's company Rosen Sound has become synonymous with unparalleled expertise in synthesizer tech, with contributions that extend well beyond technical support. Their innovative approach to every synth customer and ability to solve complex challenges on the fly have made them a key collaborator and go-to for artists who demand nothing but the best in their sound. Let's dive into this video where Rob takes us on a hands-on tour, demonstration, and inside view of my Moog IIIc modular synthesizer, also known as the Plantasia Moog IIIc. It's the crown jewel of Moog synthesizers, and it's heard on the earliest and some of the most well-known synth recordings of all time. And be sure to watch Alex Ball's latest masterful documentary video titled The Plantasia Synth. And a special shout out to you, Rob, for bringing this beautiful instrument to me. Many thanks. I hope you enjoy this video. Well, good morning, and allow me to introduce my really good friend, Rob Rosen. He's the founder of Rosen Sound, the place for restorations, for sales, for fixing, for rentals, for everything synthesizer, and also for creative things about electronic music. I mean, Rob has just been a godsend to me ever since I met him, however many years ago has it been now?
About 10 years now.
10 years, wow. It's been a great 10-year run. And it's like, I don't know if it's peaked, but Rob found this beautiful crown jewel Moog IIIc for me, and we're here to talk about it and dive into it.
Well, that's really nice of you, but I think that finding it was definitely more collaborative because we were contacted about it from a video that you and I collaborated on your channel.
All right, well, let's see what you got.
Oh boy, now I have to play.
Let's hear a C.
Let's hear a C.
Note for note. Pretty rich. Okay, here's what I got.
Nice. That's awesome. So you definitely have yourself to thank for this as well.
Well, one thing leads to the other, right? If you
That's
trace
right.
your life back, it's like one of those 6 degrees types of things, right?
Yes.
Where it's all connected. It was the Moog versus ARP 2600 video where I had to like fight off a monster Moog, Rob's System 55 with 12600.
Which you actually did a really great job at because, you know, the comments were pretty mixed, like, you know, Moog,
Wow.
ARP Moog.
Super fun. Well, it led to this.
That's right.
So here we are. I just think it's a great opportunity to dive into it,
Okay.
you know, and for you to talk about it, like from your point of view, and in all kinds of ways, like what you love, like why did you even care about modular synthesizers, you know, in this day and age, and because you have a lot of polyphonic synthesizers, and they're I don't know, these aren't the easiest things to deal with.
No, they're not. They're very antiquated. But, you know, when it comes to the classic modular stuff, it kind of reminds me of really just how I grew up as a millennial, where we were kind of like the last generation that still had to figure out how to do things the hard way, more or less. Like, okay, we're young enough and old enough where if we wanted to use the internet, someone had to get off the phone and things like that. And really figuring things out, I think, you know, the advent of the internet with MySpace and, you know, all the websites that we had to do, a lot of us had to learn how to code a little bit. Really go the hard way to get your favorite song to be on the page when someone went to your page and things like that. And vintage modular synthesis reminds me of that because you really can't just turn it on and get something. You have to patch things, and you have to make everything talk to each other, tune everything the right way, scale everything the right way, or else you get nothing, or you get a bunch of terrible sounds.
Yeah.
So it's getting your head back into the old school way of doing things, which is quite literally patching things together, and trying to get something musical out of it. And then once you're done with it, you take the chords out, and then you'll probably never hear that exact patch ever again.
Right.
Even if you take a picture of it, somehow it's never the same the next time.
You can kind of weed out if somebody really has a deep understanding of synthesis too, because this, you have to do everything like you said.
It's university.
And then yeah, it is university. And trace your footsteps, because sometimes you have to go backwards. You know, when you just look at a patch, you just walk up to a patch, well, what's going on here? And you go backwards. So if you learn to go forwards and backwards with sound making, and I think it's quite an advantage, especially even applied to these other synthesizers. So then, did you have an immediate affinity to modular, or did you kind of start out with the newer stuff?
Well, like everybody in my generation, we started out with newer products, you know, newer Korg products from the late 90s, early 2000s.
That caught your ear, though, was the newer stuff, right?
I mean, that's all that I could get or afford.
No, but you could hear it. You could, like,
of course.
Aspire.
That's right. You know, my hope was to get the great analog sounds out of whatever I could reasonably obtain. But once you hear a proper modular synthesizer for the first time, it's kind of all over from there. It's like, okay, I'm going to put this Triton away, and I'm going to figure out how to one day get a Moog modular, or even a .com modular, or something of that great analog fatness to make my dreams come true. And the Moog is kind of the crown jewel of all those things, even if it's really the most simple of all the vintage modulars, whether it be the 2500, the EMU systems, the System 700 even. You know, the Moog just has an incredible sound that can be replicated by essentially nothing.
So what dreams does it make come true? Is it sound only, or does it like make a dream come true that you have to work harder? Or is it a dream come true that you can't repeat the sound? What are the dreams that surround the Moog?
That's a tough question for me to answer, but my answer is going to be it just when you kind of become one with the machine in front of you, and you feel like you're connecting with it, and you feel like you're connecting with something that's almost speaking back to you. Whether it's just turning one knob on the sequencer and the whole melody changes, you know, you feel like you're collaborating with an extraterrestrial.
Okay, well see, and you can speak on a whole other level, because I get my hands on the front of it and I feel that, but you get your hands in it.
Yeah, and there's a smell back there, I'll tell you.
I mentioned that once.
Yeah.
I mentioned that once. There is a smell, even from, well, because I have to plug stuff in the back too. I guess it's just a sensory, you know.
It's an experience.
Experience,
It's almost like driving a car, you know, or a non-autonomous car, I guess. You know, once you're in it, you have to make it go, and it'll give you a response back, and that's how you drive. And it's the same thing with the modular synthesizer.
Are you convinced you can't get this sound digitally?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it would be, you definitely can't get the experience digitally, and I think that's even more damning.
How does that affect the listener who doesn't know what you did?
I don't think it really matters, because what you're putting out is what the result of you interacting with something.
Right, and that's what they feel.
The interaction between this or a keyboard and mouse, it would be different universes.
I think that's it. And it's are you conveying the music in you? And this helps you. It's like not having to fight an instrument. You know, this gets you there. And also the unexpected that occurs in this land.
That's right.
And as a composer too, like some of the best music I wrote, I didn't like set out to do. It's just like, well, what did I just do?
Well, when you were just talking about retracing your steps, like sometimes you're retracing what you're doing in a patch, and then you take one chord out and you're like, oh wow, there it is. And then you start moving forward in a totally different path.
Right.
And as long as you hit record, then
as long as you record.
great.
But also, like when I pull one chord, I thought, I go, what's going on?
Yeah.
I want to remember that for next time, so I could at least get close to that, because it's another fork in the road, right? And I can't get necessarily the exact thing, but I know that new fork. So when I'm thinking like, oh, that led me to something, I was using the filter coupler in a different kind of way, or putting two inputs in it or something. So now that's like a new fork that I can explore. And there's really like you can't really mess it up. You can put things in the wrong hole sometimes, and like it might do something that you don't even know that it's going to do. Jumping in here to remind you to like and subscribe. Please push that button. I've noticed that 75% of you haven't subscribed to the channel, and we want to keep bringing these videos to you, and it's the one thing we need your help to do, to give back to us, and we can keep giving back to you guys. So looking forward to hearing your comments about this and more. Now back to the video. Well, this is a great opportunity, I think, to check out like what this particular 3C, right? We know the history of it. We've talked about that. It came through Bob Moog, Mort Garson, and then it went to someone we don't know, and then it went to Mark Barton, and then it came through you to me through a video, you know, and then it needed a lot of restoration, right?
It ton of restoration.
We found it in a driveway.
Yes, under the supermoon. We indeed went very late at night to get this thing, and I was shocked to see it set up in a driveway.
And Mark revealed that they did it on purpose.
Really?
Yeah, they put it in the driveway so that when we came, this is what he told me, when we pulled up with our headlights on, then it would appear. And I said, well, you also forgot about the supermoon, like we downlit it.
Well, that's exactly how I felt. Was I was looking around for the address, I'm just like, wait a second, what's my light hitting? And it's like, wait, that's the Moog. That's the thing.
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, that was wild.
And I turned around and Dante was in the back seat. And it was just like, the Moog is on the driveway.
And believe me, I bought thousands of synthesizers at this point in all kinds of scenarios, and I've never bought something like this out of a driveway. I've gotten plenty of things out of great garages, sketchy garages, but never a Moog 3C in a driveway.
I think that's just another chapter in the stories of this thing. And we're going to move forward. This is a totally relevant instrument, I believe. And now that you're getting it up to spec, I would say we're a good percentage of the way there. There's still some little things. I mean, restoring something like this is certainly a process, right? It's not like something I just say, you know, I'm going to drop it off. Can I have it this Saturday? And you go, yeah. It's
not linear, yeah. And even worse, when it's like this specific model or some other models that would be of similar caliber, is that it has a lot of history, and you want to preserve that history and not change as much as possible, really, which is, as a technician, can be very frustrating, and as a musician, can become frustrating at some point, because you're like, well, you know, this is great that it's original, but it'd be nice if this module was a little bit more reliable. I think that if somebody were to have purchased this, you know, and they were in Florida or something, we probably would have gone a lot farther with replacing stuff, because we know that they're not going to be able to get anything fixed, you know. But this has the lucky opportunity to remain as original as possible, and give it the best chance to keep its history while still being as functional as possible. And obviously, you and I have a great relationship, and it's easy for me to come by and tweak it, take a module if it needs it, and fix it.
How do you rank this, you know, compared to other modular Moogs that you've seen?
Personally, I think it's the best one, because it's except for the custom modules, except in the one that doesn't do anything because it doesn't have the 960 that Mort used to have off to the left in a rack.
Mort put custom modules in.
Yeah. So I think, you know, ignoring that and knowing that we're about to put another 904A, I think it's the best one that I've ever seen.
904A is another low-pass filter. So we have two manuals, which are two keyboards, so we'll be able to get two separate voices with two filters. So he did replace some things. I guess he removed a sequencer. I mean, we can talk about that. We'll go into let's dive into the front panel, and then we also have a box of stuff that Rob's going to remind me like what all that stuff is.
Sure, hand me something and I'll tell you what it is.
A lot of stuff, wires, and like looks like a power supply. You know, he's going to have to explain all this. I got the Moog back with this box.
Yeah.
So,
which we, as you know, most of our customers will say that when you got your thing back, I didn't give you any parts, because most parts just end up being trash. But when you're working on something historic, you do have to keep the parts. So here we have a power supply.
Let's go into it now. Yeah.
Still has the smell, and you know, it has this fun multi-canned capacitor or multi-capacitor thing, with different taps. There's multiple capacitors in this one cylinder. And
was that the original power supply?
This is one of the original power supplies. The original power supplies that were in the Moog, the main cabinet, were removed.
Oh, before we got it.
Way before we got it.
I remember that now, because Mark said you're going to need power supplies.
Yeah, and they put some, I think, Xerox power supplies in there, or HP power supplies.
That for a copy machine?
Yeah, and they had to be manually reset. That's why it had those two switches on the front. And obviously, all that stuff was gone, and apparently they weighed like 1,000,000 pounds as well.
All right, so wait a minute. We got this guy.
It's your floors.
And so I'm supposed to just keep this because it's history, right?
Yeah, it goes in the attic.
But this was part of, like, Bob Moog put this in?
I couldn't say if he did himself, but surely Moog. That is a Moog supply. It has the Moog tag, and that Actually,
Oh,
super
here's the
important
Moog
because
tag.
that actually has the serial number of the unit on it.
1097. Model 910, that's the power
That's
supply.
the Model 910 power supply.
Right there, 1097, Model 910. Moog power supply. Okay, and it has like his, what did you call this kind of labeling?
Dymo, old Dymo labeling.
Oh, embossed.
Yeah.
Fuse.
Still get those.
Okay. Next.
And a nice lamp cord as well.
This guy.
Yeah.
Lamp cord.
That's
Look at that.
dangerous.
And you plug it in with this. Yeah, it's not even like grounded.
Not
right?
grounded or anything. Good luck.
Okay.
And then next, this is a monstrous and dead transformer. This transformer is actually broken. So this ran the lights. So this Moog has what's called lighted levers. I believe it's by Switchcraft. And essentially, there's a light that's on all the time inside of these levers that would have normally been powered by that power supply or that transformer that Anthony's picking
Gonna
up.
hold up.
Yeah. And they were all blown in this one. Later Moogs had also illuminated switches, but they were only illuminated when the function was actually turned on. These are illuminated all the time, and they actually have a colored gel inside the switch that when you move a switch up, it changes the gel and thusly changes the color. So that goes from red when activated to blue when deactivated. Very few Moogs have these switches. I think they look really cool. And all the bulbs are blown. So as we were discussing earlier, I was able to rig in a new power supply for them that's not that monster transformer. And I got the bulbs from a old model train shop in Burbank.
Which I used to have in
Yeah.
like those in the 60s, these little kid trains, but they were like heavy metal, you know, like the engine weighed like this, you know? And so Rob's sourcing these bulbs, and so they're actual bulbs made way back then, or do they remake them?
I'm not sure what the origin of the bulbs I got are. I'm not sure if they're new old stock or they're still made. I imagine there's something compatible still made for sure. But you know, vintage synths are funny because there are some like parallel product and industries.
Right.
For polysynths, the main one is arcades. Arcade machines, you know, use Z80s, ROMs, all kinds of TTL and CMOS.
But the designers were just pulling from what they could find.
That's
like
all-
they'd
yeah,
make a
that's all it
trip to
was.
the electronics store or something, right?
But as far as like total product parallels, arcades are more synonymous with, you know, vintage programmable polysynths. And funny enough, when we need bulbs, we head to the train people, the train industry.
That's funny.
Yeah.
And what else is in the box?
So we have a shield for that transformer, so that would have been mounted to the chassis.
Okay, back to this guy.
This is just
A shield.
this is a paper that Gene Stopp drew for Mark to show the module placement, which we did alter to be back to the way it would have been originally, because where the mixer was causing
Well, let's hold
noise.
that up. Gene Stopp was one of the great Moog techs, right? Mm-hmm. Didn't he design the reissues?
The reissues is, I believe, Keith Emerson's tech as well. And here's just some stuff for the old supplies that were in there. We don't really need to show that. And here's just bags of old parts that are separated by modules. These are for the 921s. Here's I think these are just extra bulbs. So these would be bulbs that go in the sequencer.
Oh, sequencer
Yeah.
bulbs. Yeah, so this Moog did go to New York for display, I guess in around 2018, 2019, and it had all these parts in it. It wasn't functioning at all, but
Yeah.
it was historical enough where they shipped it in this giant crate all the way to New York and put it on display, and people just looked at it.
Yeah. Well, it was because it was the Moog used on Plantasia. So,
That was enough.
yeah, that was more than enough.
But so many other great pieces of music. I mean, Mort used it on TV commercials, and he used it on game shows, and he used it in feature films, and pieces of music that I like even more than Plantasia. I'm like, these great works, you know. And
When you were telling my dad the other day about all the works that he did, and including the Moog, it was pretty mind-blowing.
yeah, he was a brilliant composer in many genres. String arranger, pop music, he had a hit, and jazz, you know, and then electronic music. And also he was like one of the first DJs, maybe the first. I don't know how far you can backdate DJs, but he used a handle. I'd have to look it up what it is. I'll put it on the screen, DJ something. He had 5 or 6 different, also known as names. And he did concerts just like DJs where he would just pretend to play the Moog and he would play his tape.
That's amazing.
Like so, and he was doing that like out, live performances because it's just, back then they couldn't figure out what to do with a monophonic
and
instrument.
one of his aliases was Lucifer, right?
Lucifer was one of them.
It's very metal.
Well, yeah, and Mark talks a little bit about that. We don't know if it was just a cool factor thing or where he was coming from, but
I'm sure it was.
It might have been. It was very in vogue back then, sort of the occult, more the occult, and the psychedelic world and that sort of thing. It all fit, but the guy was a genius, and the fact that he also knew how to program it, because a lot of composers, even the ones that I worked with, I was programming for composers in the 80s, which is a whole decade and a half later, that didn't know anything about electronic music. And this guy was a composer at the same level that could program the thing and record it and conceptualize what it would take to build tracks, vertically.
And to add on to that, using this specific Moog was also incredible that he was able to do anything because half the problems with this thing are just due to the earliness of the design. Almost all the modules in this predate Moog's schematics. And that makes it even more difficult to work on and to program even when it was new.
For you?
Yeah. No, even for Mort. This would have been an even more challenging system to use than something that would have been produced maybe even 2 years later.
Only Bob knew.
Yeah. So there's definitely I'm sure there was a lot of upkeep that needed to happen with this thing as time went on when he was using it just to make it even remotely usable because this is a really early Moog system.
Well, Mark mentioned he thinks part of the story, because when he met Bob Moog to get it signed, that Bob said he thinks he remembers driving it out to Mort. Because it wasn't just like we're just going to throw it on a truck and get it out here and then go plug it in. He had to check it out.
Of course. Make
sure everything's working and transit. Well, I think we should get into it up close now and talk about the specific modules because there's some extremely interesting things there.
Okay, sounds good. Let's do it.
Just a quick reminder to visit anthonymarinellimusic.com to sign up to our mailing list. You'll get exclusive free content there and a chance to be part of our community. So looking forward to seeing you there. Back to the video. So Rob and I are about to dive into this Moog IIIc, right? This is going to be a fun part. So
I hope.
Well, okay, so we're going to push the sequencer, the red button. So we're high up. You just transposed it.
Yeah, we have this keyboard down here set up for transposition. This is a really funny keyboard, this one on the bottom. One of the more interesting ones in the system in that it has relays in it every time you press a key. So if we actually shut off the sequencer real quick, we can hear that. Put your phone down here so you can really hear it. When I hit a key, you'll hear a little relay click. You hear that?
Oh, sure.
It's fun. No other keyboard has that.
Just this bottom keyboard.
This one uses bus bars. This one triggers the gate with a relay.
But also, this keyboard is very unique, right?
Yes, it has
the answer.
Yeah, it has the actuators for velocity sensitivity, which should work. But it also doesn't scale very well and probably needs to be lightly modified to work. It's also meant to work with this external switch here, which I don't know where the big ugly box went.
I do.
But we'll get that in a second. But you can see in grease pencil someone wrote EX. When you turn it on, it'll switch to external scaling based on this incredibly ugly box that is on the floor right there. Where you have every note written in grease pencil. So you could tune each key of the keyboard, which is insane.
We got to do that. We got to do it once.
We got to do it once, but not today.
So you'll see it. We'll do it once.
Yes, we have to.
So if you guys really understand this, right, there's like an indication of each of the notes on the keyboard. I should say notes. I should just say keys.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can change the note to be any kind of tuning you want it to be.
And they're all on fine-tune type potentiometers that you need a flathead screwdriver to adjust.
Amazing. And then you dial it in and hopefully it stays.
Hopefully.
And I would say this was like definitely a byproduct of the day and age that it came out because there was a lot of experimentation in Eastern music, and what the Beatles were doing and a little bit of Indian influence and that sort of thing. So it allows you to tune the keyboard up into these sort of Eastern, non-Western types of tunings, and then keep track of it because it's still going to look like an octave, but then it's like going to scale up if you put in microtones or whole tone tuning or that sort of thing.
And you couple that with 901s that barely tune to begin with.
Okay, 901s.
Magic.
901s. What is a 901?
A 901 is the original oscillator that was in a Moog Modular. So this is a 901A, this is an oscillator driver, and that will drive 3 901Bs.
And drive means?
Drive means they share a common control voltage. It has the linear to exponential converter, and all 3 oscillators share one of those, which is what makes the 901 such a special oscillator, as opposed to what came later over here, the 921 oscillator. This is what's found in later Moogs, and I'm going to safely assume that Mort asked for these to be installed in this system later on, probably because these are so difficult to keep in tune. These are not as difficult. Each oscillator in these has their own linear to exponential converter, so they're not all roped in as hard to the oscillator driver, the 921A.
Yeah.
But they all do still share a common control voltage with this and can all be transposed with this knob, pulse width here, and they're, great oscillators.
More like a mini Moog vintage, right?
Exactly. Yeah, very similar.
1973-ish. And that's when the System 55 and all the later Moog modules came out. So this is a 3C, and it means 3-story building, right? 1, 2, 3.
In a cabinet configuration.
And C means beautiful wood cabinet, whereas you could get a 3P, which were those like black cases that all stood next to each other, like you see in the Series 15 or something like that.
Yeah, Model 10s, and that's like what Tangerine Dream used.
Yeah, and it's on the cover of Switched on Bach too. Even though she used this, it was they put the wrong one on the cover, right?
That's right, and I think in one version of the cover, if not the final, they have the headphones plugged into the output of the filter or something, or the input of the filter.
So the 901s are not the most stable, but they kick butt, right? We do like the sound of them.
They sound incredible because of all 3 oscillators sharing the same linear to exponential converter. They beat in a certain way that other oscillators don't. But they don't stay in tune as well, and these ones even worse because they're just so old. The 901A predates the Moog schematics, and just it's so difficult to tune them. Some of these are pretty good, some of them still need some help. And
you only have you have 3 control inputs just for pitch. Here's here's pulse width modulation. You turn it. Pulse width modulation on the 921s, you can actually patch in a low frequency oscillator or envelope generator or something like that. But on the original ones, you can't really get changing pulse width modulation unless you turn the knob.
That's right.
And then Rob and I just discovered, I pointed out to him that this particular oscillator driver, you see there's 2 sets of 901s with a driver. I call this number 1, and then oscillator 1, oscillator 2, oscillator 3, and then this is driver number 2, oscillator 4, oscillator 5, oscillator 6. Rob noticed about driver number 2 that it was a little different.
Yeah, so that one, as you noted, tunes the best, and that one is a later driver. So somebody must have given Mort a later 901A so that it would actually be tunable. And that's just because of the capacitance match. Diodes are different. The layout's different in general, but that makes a huge difference.
So Bob Moog was improving it, and then you just don't get it like, you don't get it through the internet like your upgrade.
Exactly. You had to pay.
Or you had to come out. Who would even do it?
You had to send a letter to somebody, and then they send you back an invoice, you mail a check.
I heard about an upgrade, who would even know?
Well, back then, people checked their mail.
Okay, so we've got a driver and 3 oscillators, a driver and 3 oscillators. Those are 901s. You can see that first 8 modules in a row. And then the famous 921s that are the more stable ones that have a driver as well, and 3 oscillators. So now we count 9 oscillators on this guy, this thing. And then there's 2 more oscillators on here.
So you have your standalone 921 here.
Well, this is a 901.
That is a 901. This is a standalone 921.
Now, these are 9As, 921A, 921B, and the drivers are A, right? And then the oscillators are B. This is a self-sufficient oscillator. It's all in itself. There's no driver.
Variable level outputs. That's really the only benefit to that. It also just takes up a lot more space. And then you also have this one here in the corner.
Yes. 901. Yeah, you have fixed levels and variable levels on this one. Okay, and then there's one more hanging out here that I use basically for LFO. And it has a driver. You could theoretically attach a couple more oscillators to it.
That's right.
But it's just one, it's a pairing of one to one there. Okay, so now what's the best thing? Like, what modules should we do next? Is there any kind of order you would think? Here's a tone generator, white noise.
White noise, one jack, which is cool. Let's just start from the left. Should we start from the top?
Let's go.
So here we have 901A and 901B. Next to that, we have the 905 reverberation unit, spring reverb.
Which is you just go in, and then out. Here's your mix.
And blend, yeah.
Yeah.
That's all you get. Next to that is the custom module. So this would have interfaced with Mort's additional 960 sequential controller that he had in a rack next to the 3C.
Yep.
So he removed that and just has one 960 in here. And just for the record, you only need one 960. You really don't need two.
Okay, 960 is the sequential controller, or it's the sequencer?
Yeah. So this module is basically non-functioning. It does nothing of use in this system and will be replaced with a 904A very soon.
Which is a low-pass filter.
Yeah, which we'll get to soon. Here's the 960 sequential controller. Great sequencer, classic sequencer. Has 3 rows. You can use the 3rd row for timing if you please. Has its own internal clock, different voltage range outputs. Really a great sequencer, and that is coupled, of course, with the very cool sequential switch, which allows you to take the signal from the sequencer to gate. And if you're creative with it, you can make this a multi-row sequencer to get more steps. So we have it connected to number 6. So if I hit run on the sequencer, you'll hear it switch to, or you'll see it switch to a different, input. And then you could run that to have, switch between rows and get more steps.
Well, you have a little mixer here. Right?
Yeah.
So you can patch the output of this row into this mixer, and then the output of this row into this mixer, and then as Rob was saying, you'll see the light switch, and then you get first it'll get the output of this one, then this one, and then this one, and then this one. So as this light switches, it'll send different signal, control voltage signal to wherever you want.
That's right. So you can use that for super cool stuff. Here's an interface for that where you can take the triggers and turn them into S-trigs. You have a, looks like an audio to V-trig output here, or circuit here, which is really cool. You can plug a guitar into that. Here's another custom module. This one, I believe, was made by Bob himself. So this is another interfacing module for the 960. I know at some point we kind of determined what this does, but
gates.
Yeah.
It lines up with the sequencer, but it's a lot of gates you get on each step of the sequencer. And it doesn't matter what row, you just get if you're on position number 1, then position number 1 over here, you'll get 4 gates that you can send anywhere you want. And it actually works.
Yeah, and then you get the fixed, the low pass, high pass, and the attenuator.
The sole attenuator.
Yeah. So that's another custom module that, besides the attenuator, and I guess you like those filters, and the later Moogs and most Moogs do have those filters somewhere.
Just fixed ones like that?
Yeah, the fixed filters.
Okay.
They are useful.
And you can see Bob, well, that's not the exact place. Later on, he put little pieces of labeling like that. We'll get around to this, but I just wanted to show you that, where he just labeled it with a little labeler.
Yeah. So here's the 914 fixed filter bank. This is an inductor-based filter where you can adjust the individual bands, and it sounds really cool.
Here, let's do it. Let's do the Mort thing, because here, can you hold that a sec?
Sure.
Keep it on the fixed filter bank, and we'll pop. I'm just taking the noise, putting it into the fixed filter bank, and then I'm going to grab another long cord that Rob made for me.
Merry Christmas.
It's a beautiful Christmas present. Okay, and I'm going to put it into this output jack. So, oh, it's getting cold. Okay, you take over.
Oh yeah, get that low end.
Explain what's happening.
So it takes the signal and buses it into all these different inductors, and then these knobs control the level of said inductor.
This is a passive circuit.
It is an active circuit, but it is most of the components in it are passive components.
Oh, I was told it was passive.
It's not a totally passive module.
Such fine control, though.
So the way Mort had this is he had this one where your mixer is, And because of all the inductors, which are just, basically tiny transformers.
Way over here on this side of the synth.
So because of that, it was causing noise in the whole system. So we had to move it back where it would normally be in a 3C.
It would normally be here.
It would normally be.
So Mort had it like way over here. And we'll talk about that mixer. I love that mixer.
Yeah, so that's that for that. And yeah, great module. You make some really crazy formant sounds with that. You have an additional envelope generator here, another VCA that just kind of hang out by themselves. And then here you have your control voltage bus for the filters. So these will just take the internal wiring and basically they're normal here. So you have your 3-pitch things that are system-wide, and then you can just activate them here. And unlike the bottom ones, this has blue and green instead of blue and red.
Beautiful.
Here's your voltage control.
One sec, though. This is like an ARP 2600 because there's some normaling.
That's right.
You don't have to patch everything on this Moog. So.
Yeah. So your keyboard pitch, if you're plugged into the controllers on the back, they'll show up here. So you could track the filter with that. And now your keyboard is tracking the filter. Quite helpful.
Right, and this would be keyboard 2. We have keyboard 1,
or
keyboard
control 2.
And we're using the sequencer now on control 3. And those control things are right down here. 1, 2, 3, for pitch and for triggers.
That's right. And then should we move on to the right?
Please.
Yeah, so here's the 904B voltage controlled high-pass filter. Great high-pass filter module. Not much really to say about that, besides it is what it advertises. We'll move on really quickly to the 904A. That's the most famous thing, changed the face of music as we know it, the voltage-controlled low-pass filter. The classic Moog ladder filter design that is synonymous with synthesizers and Moog and music in general. Just like one of the juiciest, best filters of all time. Yeah. And then to tie these both together, you had the 904C filter coupler, which with some very creative wiring on the back and a 9-gang switch, you can basically bust the filters into each other and share their control voltages and create a band reject and a band pass filter.
And that's, you can see how I can thin it out.
And you can adjust it with this.
So this is a band pass filter. This is the band width, how wide, and then this is the center frequency. So you can move it.
So these 904Cs are only found on these earlier Moogs. I don't know why they removed it for the System 55 and 35 and all those. I'm getting one for my 55 and sacrificing some module space because this is a really incredible module.
It's a shredder. There's nothing like it. Big
time. Now moving on from there, we have a bank of VCAs, 902 VCAs. They, again, do as advertised. So, you plop an audio signal there and an output, and you can control the amplitude with a control input with linear or exponential response. Next to that, we have a very confusing module that does make sense once you really get around to it. So this just basically takes the pre-wired gates from the keyboard and other sources and buses them to the envelope and the 911A dual trigger delay. And I believe also will bus one of the envelope outputs to the VCA control inputs.
It does them accordingly. I call this 1, 2, and 3 envelope generator. And envelope generator 1 is automatically like normal bust to VCA 1, envelope generator 2 to VCA 2, and envelope generator 3 to VCA 3.
Yeah.
Which is quite convenient.
Yeah, so they note that here with, left, center, and right, thusly for these modules. Yeah, so this works great, does exactly what you'd hope it would do. Next to that is, we already talked about the envelope generator. Here's the 911A dual trigger delay. This lets you put a gate into it, and then you can delay that gate here, which can make some really cool sounds that I rarely use, but it can be very cool. And then you can couple those as well. So you can make, I believe, make 2 delays of series.
Like on a MS-20, you get some nice delays.
Then, here's more envelope generators, and here's an envelope follower, which you could explain what an envelope follower does.
Well, it just basically converts amplitude that comes from the outside world, from a microphone or from a guitar, to voltage. And then you can send that voltage to make your filter get brighter, or to make pitches go up if you send it to an oscillator. That's the most common usage of it.
That's right. So you can see that this is a very weird-looking module. This was definitely handmade. The inside of its perf board, certainly made by Bob or one of the chief engineers at Moog at the time. So you have the Dymo labeling. The veneer is, just an additional piece of metal, etched metal on there. And you can even see that the numbering of the module is somewhat crooked and different in font than the modules next to it.
So this is a special one.
Very special.
Bottom row.
Bottom row, here we go. We already talked about the oscillators, so we'll just very quickly gloss over those. The 901s will produce sawtooth, sine, pulse, and triangle at a full level output. Great classic oscillators. Next to that is another bank of exactly that.
Something I learned is that it only makes sawtooths.
What do you mean?
Well, it's based in, that's my understanding.
It's a sawtooth core, that's right.
And which means?
Which means that the base of the oscillator is a sawtooth oscillator, or sawtooth waveform, which is then wave-shaped into various different waveforms. I think Mark, who sold this to you, was telling me that the sine wave from this, it's either the sine or the triangle. I'm going to feel really bad about being wrong, but it's one of those that Bob told him that he got the wave-shaped circuit for that from like a military circuit book or so, like just like a basic electronics book.
He explains that.
Yeah. So that's really cool. Fun fact. And here's the 921s, a lot more stable than the 901s. And they're just, great oscillators, almost like a mini Moog. They produce the same thing, except you can DC modulate and AC modulate the oscillator pitch, and this isn't sync like we're used to on synthesizers. I couldn't even really begin to describe it off the top of my head without sounding like an idiot. But you can use that if you have a standalone 921, you can do some really cool stuff with the clamping and including the sync to make an actual synchro sound that'll
Which
rip
I
your
don't
head
have
off.
a standalone 921. That's an oscillator that's like this 901. It's a standalone, but it's a 921.
And it actually adds more functionality than just fixed level
It's
or
probably
variable
their
level.
best oscillator.
Definitely. Moving on from that is a white sound source, which I think is kind of funny. I never noticed it's sound instead of noise. So white sound comes right out of here. And that's just about that. And then next to that, you have the 4-channel mixer, which is a module that not a lot of people use, but Anthony, of course, has found great use for it.
I love it so much. I think it was like a lot for live performance, the way it was designed, because it was the age of quad. Mm-hmm. And a lot of synth, like Suzanne Ciani just performs in quad. And Switched on Bach came out in quad. And I think there was just a big push for quad. And Bob Moog was a futurist and a visionary, so he put a quad mixer in here, and it's a unique mixer because you put 4 inputs into it. But then, through these knobs, you can pan the inputs to different speakers. So if I put, let's say, a trumpet here, I can have the trumpet going on one, so it's going to go to that speaker. But the same trumpet now can go to a different speaker, or a different speaker, or a different speaker. And you can do that with 4 inputs. So you can basically control the mix of each instrument in each speaker, which is really unique. And you get these like audio file, like on a record player, bass and treble controls. Mm-hmm. So like after I've designed the entire sound, I can just fine tune some bass and treble. Yeah. And it's really beautiful shape on the bass and treble controls. And then you just have a master for each one of these speakers. So if you're pushing too hard, and an output for each one, and it's just a very unique module, and it also, like all these modules, saturates. Mm-hmm. So when you push them pretty much into the 7 range, on the knob, like here you go, you can see 5, 6, 7, right in here, you start to get this beautiful harmonic distortion. And that adds a whole, we're all trying to get these expensive preamps and everything. It's almost like there's one on every module here.
Right. It's definitely unique, and I'm glad that you're finding a good use for it.
Well, I'm dying. I mean, that's where digital has a long way to go. I mean, they can do it. I mean, the theory is there, but they got to be able to dial in all that sort of random nuance on every module, whatever the heck it's doing on any given day.
Of course, and you wouldn't even think to really do that unless it's right in front of you, which it is on here.
Now the basement.
So yeah, let's do the half-space modules down here. There are 3 of these that are essentially identical. So
1, 2, 3, 4.
4, never mind. So these are your, I believe, CP3A mixers. These are really great sounding mixers, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. And they also have a click filter, which is interesting. I believe that just switches it from DC to AC coupling.
It actually rolls off high end.
That makes sense.
So any kind of tick, like if you have your keyboard, you got a little tick out of the envelope generator or whatever. But it's like, it's another filter, basically.
Yeah. And you'll see next to that it says trunk 1 and trunk 2, and it'll say that sequentially on the other modules. That is labeling done by Anthony, which makes sense. So basically, these trunks are what's called trunk lines, and those appear on the back of the system. And that basically just lets you have cabling running to the back to maybe a power amp or a mixer, and you can access that area by not having a mess of cables. You can take care of that just through here.
I can bring in audio sources too, right?
Yeah, that's right. You can also come in from there. That's right. It's literally just an extension cord.
Like if
from
my
here to
guitar
the back.
player, I could have them right there. Just bring them into the mixer and patch them through the whole thing.
That's right. And then next to that, we have more of these cool lighted levers, and these just bus the control signals to the above oscillator bank. So this interacts with this column of this module right here. So you have, system control voltages 1, 2, and 3, which could be keyboard, maybe ribbon controller, or if there's nothing patched in there, you can use something external, or in this case, we're using it for the sequencer. And then number 4, you have this attenuator.
Right there.
Yeah, where you can plug into here, so external input, and then you have full blast, or you can attenuate it back, and that appears here on number 4.
And it's handy. That's like vibrato. I use it a lot for vibrato. And when I want to send a low frequency oscillator to this entire bank, so it'll go to all 3 oscillators, right? Because it goes to the driver. And then you can just bring up vibrato or any other.
Which you were doing earlier,
Yeah, right here. See it right there.
And one cool thing that I noticed you were doing earlier is that, so this is the vibrato oscillator here.
Yep.
So let's turn it up a little. And then we can make it faster.
Yep.
But what you actually had before I changed it was...
Oh, yeah.
You actually had this on, then you can track the LFO. So it'll get faster as you play higher on the keyboard.
Which is a cool feature of the memory Moog.
That's right. And then moving on to the right here, you have your controller outputs here. This is very much looks like a handmade module.
Oh, yeah.
So you have 2 sets of mults right here, which, it's just a normal multiple. And then you have pitch outputs for your keyboard. So you have 2 different outputs going there. So you can send the keyboard voltage to do 2 different destinations. And then they have that for controller 2 and controller 3, which work as inputs if there's nothing plugged into the back, by the way, which is what we're using for the sequencer right here. Interestingly, next to that, we had the trigger output. And the trigger output on later Moogs, and really most Moogs, would be a Synth Jones jack like you'd see over here. That's a Synth 2-pin Jones plug.
Right, that goes with this kind of end.
Yeah, so just because of the topology of how they produce gates on these old Moog systems, they limit the gating to these types of jacks. But interestingly, on this specific Moog, is that they still have that trigger on a 1/4 inch, which is kind of silly. So you need these special 1/4 to cinch cables to actually, use this gate with whatever you want elsewhere.
Yeah, but you can also just use it directly into an oscillator or a filter and then get gate voltage.
Well, it's not voltage. It's just shunting the ground. So you're essentially just.
Well, it makes it pop.
It'll make a pop, yeah, but it's not very useful. Yeah, but yeah. So and then of course over here you have the power switch. So when you're done having fun, you turn it off.
It's as simple as that. The on-off on it. There's no boot load.
That's right. You see these 2 hole plugs. That's where they had that HP or Xerox supply. I forget what was in there. And yeah, that's how you would turn on the individual voltages, which is insane. But of course that's been removed and proper power supplies are installed now.
3 fuses?
These are also a relic of the past. These I believe the 1 amp one actually has the mains fuse in it. These 2 are dummies.
Okay. And then just to kind of finish up, we have the keyboards do have some scaling controls, and there is a ribbon controller on this.
Ribbon controller is part of the work in progress. You can see the ribbon is very much in its own land. So we'll scoot that out of the way. This will work eventually. It's really interesting actually how they do the conductivity. They take the spring out of a very fine, like fine-tuning pot from back in the day. They removed that spring, and that's what's under here, and this conductive ribbon touches that. So kind of a fun thing that hopefully we can mess with very soon. Of course, it's here for the video. This was living in my shop for a while. Yep. Under that, we have your standard issue 950 keyboard. What's funny about this one is that the keys are like not like the way the bus bars mount to the metal frame is so mismatched. I've seen that before on these older 950s. So like the action's like stiffer in some areas because of just how the board mounts and the way it's pulling the springs. It's really hilarious, and they used these rubber standoffs to compensate, which all had to be replaced on this one. But yeah, you have momentary portamento or, you know, normal portamento here. And then you can range and scale, which I feel like they really should have made these opposite. They should have range and scale here, because you range here, scale at the top, and it's just not very intuitive. But yeah, you have a variable scale keyboard, and these work great, all things considered. It's a great keyboard. Under that, we have, as we discussed a little bit earlier, this really weird 950 keyboard that's really long. It's very deep going into the system because it has those crazy actuators that I can send you a picture of, I'm sure, for the video. And those produce trigger, velocity, and pitch. And yeah, the only other system I ever heard of having that capability was Wendy Carlos's.
Woo!
And this is a very interesting keyboard, as I discussed earlier, with the relays that you can hear clicking on and off. It's just a wild system.
Well, this is the whole wild system. And you know, this is part of this legacy of this instrument, and it's living right now. And Rob is bringing it back to life. I also want to be a part of sharing this to everyone. So as this thing progresses, we want to basically let everybody understand like the beauty of this thing and how it works, because it's not that I mean, we dove into all this sort of micro detail of it, but it's still basically pitch, timbre, duration, and amplitude. You've got oscillators, you've got filters, you have envelope generators, and you have VCAs, right? There's a mixer, we know what that is. And I'm going to hopefully, and a sequencer, and bring all this in, round it up so you can think about sound and think modularly, like we were just describing earlier, forward and backwards, and discover new things where you plug up. And this is going to apply to your soft synths too, because there's great modular stuff out there.
Of course.
And it's the same kind of thinking. So it's all part of what we want to share, and the new music that comes out of it, and just the experience, right? That's kind of like what we love too. We feel it.
Absolutely. And you know, for me as the person who restored it and continues to take care of it, you know, it's a living, breathing instrument. You know, this is the result of a genius's design.
Yeah.
And it changed music forever.
So far ahead of its time.
Way ahead of its time. And it's really a special system. It's a special instrument, whether it's a special system or not. And it really doesn't get better than this.
Wow, that's amazing to hear. And Alex, thank you for, you know, working with us on this.
Hey, buddy.
This is a joint project, and I know you feel the same way. You want to share this, and we're going to create a piece of music together. We're going to do some work that Alex got started, and I'm going to jump in on it, and then also do a little Plantasia as a ode to Mort and who else, you know, whatever else comes out of this thing. So
I think at some point we're going to put my 55 in here with the 3C and have a Moog off.
Yeah, I would love that.
But I got to get my 904C first.
He wants his filter coupler.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Rob, thank you.
Thank you, man.
See you guys soon. Oh, please remember to like and subscribe to this channel. It means a lot to me and to my team. Keeps us going. Your comments are great. You know, we read them all, and it means, you know, more than you can imagine. So keep it coming, and more videos are on the way. See you all soon.